You remember last week I ended up with this guy, horse to the barn. Remember that one? And I started out that section asking the question, what goes wrong at age 5? Because we learn so much. And then at age 5, it's like we just, even though we start going to school and we do all this stuff that's all learning, supposedly for us to learn, and yet simultaneous with that, it's almost like learning shuts down. So something goes wrong at age 5. So I asked the question, what is that? And then we talked a little bit about learning, basically, and note-taking, and I want to pick up right there and talk a little bit more from that point. If you remember, we talked about the schema, that big schema, and then these things that happen out here that we want to, like a drop of water into a glass, we want to get them in here where we really know them. Now, what happens when we send our kids to school is instead of incorporating, and I call this incorporation, where you incorporate the new into the old. You make that relationship, that connection. That's learning. But what we do is we start a 12 to 13 year program in something called memorization when we go to school. And we abandon this whole idea of incorporation. I can almost bet you that when you were in school, you heard things like, go home and learn this. And you got this list of stuff. And basically what was implied there is you had to go home and memorize it. You didn't hear any teachers telling you, you know what you need to do? You need to go home and look at each one of these topics on this list and think about things that you already know that are like this so that you can make a connection there. Anybody taught that way? See, I wasn't. And yet, up until we're age 5, that's exactly how we do everything. You have small children? I like telling new parents, new moms, watch your kids. All you got to do is just pay real close attention to what's going on with your child. And you just do that for one day, and you will confirm everything I'm saying. Because you'll see it happening right in front of you. You'll literally see it happening in the way they respond to things. Then they hit age 5, we send them to school, and our school system says, you know what? We know that for 5 years you've been learning the way God has intended you to learn. But we have a better way. It's called memorization. And while you've learned 95% of everything you know in 5 years, we're now going to take the next 12 to 13 years to teach you this better way. And so what you really get, because you only retain, what, less than 10% of everything you go through school. So you go through school for 12 years, and you end up retaining about 1 year's worth of that information. That's how inefficient it is. And so really, when you graduate high school, what you're really getting is a diploma in memorization. Hopefully, by the time you graduate high school, you know how to memorize. You don't know how to learn anything, but you know how to memorize. And so we already talked about how that doesn't work. So again, until age 5, how do we learn? Incorporation with no classes, no studying, no tests. And if you can think of anything else that goes on in a typical classroom, none of that either. None of that goes on. And yet, tremendous learning takes place. We go to school, 12 to 13 years from K-12, just a matter of just a big course in memorization. Let me show you how this doesn't work. Memorization doesn't work and how incorporation does. Remember I kind of briefly got into people who have trouble with fractions, decimals, and percentages. Okay, I want to show you what you want to learn. And if you're teaching your kids about fractions, decimals, and percentages, this is how you want to teach them. You don't want to teach them rules. So we have, everybody knows 25 cents. Everybody knows that's 1/4 of a dollar. And everybody knows that that's 25% of a dollar. Everybody knows that. Very few people do I ask, go through that they can't tell me that information. Everybody just knows that. It's just common knowledge. Well, that's fractions, decimals, and percentages. Anybody that can give me this information when I say, how do you write 25 cents, what fraction of a dollar is it, and what percentage of a dollar is it, anybody that can give me that information, I know one thing. They understand fractions and decimals and percentages as good as they're ever going to understand it. They understand it as well as I do. I mean, what else is there to understand? Okay, so the problem's not the understanding. Again, what I told you is if you have something like that, and I say convert that to a decimal, you lock up. And the reason is you forgot the rule. The rule which says if you want to convert from this to this, divide the numerator by the denominator. Now there's some neat big words to lay on a small child. When I used to teach in college, I'd ask people, what are those terms? Numerator and denominator, which ones are those? And usually I'd get one or two people raise their hand, I'd call them, and this is the response I get. Numerator is the top number and denominator's the bottom one? That's a question, right? So even the people who did volunteer weren't sure. So you're supposed to memorize that rule and know that rule so that 3-4 months, 3-4 years, whenever, when this situation here arises, you're supposed to pull this rule up on your head that says divide the numerator by the denominator. Give me a break. Y'all understand why we have tons of adults out there who say, I don't understand fractions and decimals and percentages. And what they're saying is not that they don't understand it, they don't know how to do it. They understand it just fine, they just don't know how to do it. So when I teach my kids, I say, okay, the rule, forget the rule. Don't need the rule. I'm going to show you how to get from here to here. I'm going to show you how to do this guy, this great big number, 237 divided by 1,634. How do I convert that to a decimal? And I'm not going to do that here today, but I'm going to show you how you would determine how to do that. You got these two numbers. If we're going from fraction to decimal, here it is. That's what we know. That's a concept. Everybody knows that. You know how come we all know that? We learn real fast how to deal with this stuff, right? Even your children know very quickly that 4 of those make one of those greenbacks with a 1 on it, right? And there it is. Isn't that all that is? So even kids learn that very quickly because they deal with money. As soon as they know how to do money, they got it. So here's the concept. Now, I need to know how to get from here to a decimal. Well, here's another concept for you that all of you know. I'll give you the first one. You give me the ones that are rest. The first one is we can add numbers. What's another thing we can do with two numbers? We can divide, we can multiply, and we can subtract. Anything else? Anybody think of anything else? That's pretty much it, isn't it? So here we have two numbers, and we're going to try and get from here to here, and here's two numbers. We're going to do one of those 4 things with those numbers. Okay, let's start with the easiest one. The easiest one here is this guy, right? Well, let's add those numbers. We can go 1 plus 4 or 4 plus 1. Either way, it equals what? Is that this? Okay, well, we know that's not involved in the rule, is it? So let's try the next easiest one. That's this one here. We can go 4 minus 1 or 1 minus 4. You don't even really have to work that out. Is either one of those answers going to give us that? Not even close, right? So we know that this guy's out. Let's try the next easiest one. That's this one here. So we can go 1 times 4 or 4 times 1. And both of those equal what? Either one of those, that. Well, we know that we're not going to do that. So what we're left with is 1 divided by 4 or 4 divided by 1. Let's just take the easy one. That's this one, right? What's that equal? Well, that's not right. You know, if I'm real smart, I already know how I'm going to do this because I'm down to the last thing. I've tried them all. And so it's the 1 divided by the 4, okay? So what do? We go through the normal process, blah, 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 and guess what we get? All right, now, can you tell me the rule? How do we get from here to here? We divide don't use words like numerator and denominator to your kids. I know they like doing that in public school, but forget it. Do you know what that number is? It's the top number, and this is the good. Now, give me the rule based on top and bottom. We divide the top number by the Bottom number. So to convert this to a decimal, we're going to divide what? 237. We're going to divide it by 1634. Now, you can work that out on paper, plug it into your trusty little calculator. Either way, you're going to get the right answer. And there it is. Now, what more do you need to know about fractions, decimals, and percentages? So now we understand the concept, and we know how to go from the concept to the rule. Without knowing the rule, we can figure out the rule, and we apply that rule we just came up with. We work our problem, and then what do? Forget the rule. I'm not going to carry that around in my brain. I might not need it again for 6 months. I got other things more important that I can stuff in my brain other than that stuff. Do any of you care to know how many rules are there in math? If you get up into like your calculus and all that, by the time you get up there, how many rules you're going to have memorized? Thousands. Oh my goodness gracious. And we're going to lay that on a fourth grader? Start this process of memorizing these rules, and then we wonder why they don't like math? Well, if I had to do math by learning all those rules, I don't think I'd like math either. Okay? So when I'm working math, what am I working with? When I was working with this. Let me draw my other picture back up here. Here's your schema. And here's this. These are the rules, which we learned and then did what with? Forgot. But what's in here? This stuff, right? That's in there. I can bring your fourth grade son in here right now and ask him these questions and he'll get them right. I've never met a fourth grader yet didn't understand money, what 4 quarters was. Got a lot of parents say, well, you know why I don't homeschool? Because it's the math. I can do the English, maybe, but math, forget it. Well, if you're trying to teach it via rules, you don't understand it, neither do they, and we got the blind leading the blind. But if we can figure out how to teach it via concepts, then we don't have to worry about it. And again, just a couple weeks ago, I was dealing with Katie, and she's just having all these problems, and so I finally stopped and said, Katie, take me through how you do this problem, step by step. How are you working it? And then she starts coming back, well, I think you divide this by this. What's she trying to do there? But she's trying to come up with a rule, isn't she? I'm going, Katie, hello. I think I just figured out what the problem is here. You're trying to work off rules, which you have forgotten. Because we haven't worked on this for about 3 weeks, and that rule's gone. Now let's go back and let's work. And so what do I start doing? I start drawing pictures and all that. Now next week, I'm going to be doing a lot of visual stuff with just math. I like the math because it's the subject everybody hates the most. So if you can make your point with that one, then you got to understand that you can do this with all subjects. It doesn't have to be math. And why do you want to learn this way? Why do you want to relate things like when you're taking notes and learn by association and all that? Why do you want to do that? Because when you take notes and you write down everything the person's saying, they get translated into Greek, don't they? The next time you go to read them, you say, well, might as well throw these away because I don't know. Did I write that? And you all laugh because you all been there. Let me give you an example of something I tried, a little experiment, to show you what really happens in a normal school setting. I was teaching computer classes, and so the way it worked at our school is I would teach Monday through Thursday, and then we had a test on Friday over what I had discussed Monday through Thursday, and over the reading for that week. And so one week I got this brainy idea because I was thinking about learning and everything and kind of gotten off on that. And I want to try something. So one week when I printed off my test, when I went into the copier and I had them print my test, I had them print twice as many tests as what I actually needed for the test. And so I gave the test. And my grades, I had A's and B's, C's, D's, and the F's didn't really have too many of those. They were virtually non-existent. But out of my 30 students, the bulk of them fell in here, and if you looked at the curve, if you're all familiar with that, these were my B's. I mean, I got tons of B's. Good number of A's, fair number of C's, but half the class was B's. So next Monday I come in, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I lectured like normal. Friday came, I handed out the test. But I didn't hand out a test over the material I'd covered that week. I handed out the exact test they'd had a week before because I'd made twice as many copies. This is the exact test. Anybody care to guess how my grades fell that week? My curve looked like this. No A's, couple B's, fair number of C's. Most of them were in that high D, low C range, and a bunch of F's. Do you know how long it was between the first test and the second test? 168 hours. That's what 1 week works out to. What went wrong in 168 hours? Just that short a time, all of a sudden I have a failing class. They cannot pass my class. What happened? It's very simple. They went home, they memorized so they could pass the test. And what happened over the next week? They forgot 90% of it. And if they forgot that much in 1 week, what do you think my class would have gotten if I'd have waited until graduation day and just walked in and said, oh, before we graduate you, we're going to give you this test? How do you think they'd have done? 90% of them would have totally failed with an F. I'd have had no A's and B's. I might have had a C in the group because they memorized it. And I used to tell them, you know, guys, how many of you would take your car to a mechanic and pay him the money and only get 10% of the work done? How many of you would be back in there climbing all over his case? How about you gals? You go to the beauty salon and you walk out and you just paid all this money, you look and you go home and look in the mirror and they only did about 10% of the work they were supposed to do and you look horrid. You go, oh, okay, right? Or how many of you are going to be right back down there real quick? Somebody comes in, you're going to have them paint your house. They charge you $3,000, you pay them $3,000, you go back in and look, and all they did was paint one wall in one room, and that was it. And you go, oh, okay. Well, then how come my students were coming to our school at that time, it'd be more now, but they were paying $8,000 for the program. On graduation day, they walked out with $800 worth of goods, totally happy. The education is the only thing we got where we go pay 10 times more than what we get, and we're actually pleased with it. Something seemed wrong there. And why is it? It's because we're memorizing. Now, who are the kids that actually go on to excel in life? They're the ones they're your rebellious kids. Most of these kind of kids, they give parents problems because no matter what you tell them, they're going to do it their way. And they're the smart ones. Why? No, you almost got it. They hit age 5 and they go to school and the school says, guess what? We know you've been learning God's way. Now we got a better way and we're going to teach you to do a better way. They get their back up right away and say, I don't think so. I'm not changing. I'm going to keep learning just the way I've always been learning. And so they go ahead and keep right on doing that. And they learn. Those are your valedictorians, salutatorians. And you know what's different between the valedictorian and salutatorian and the average kid in school who's just grunting through with a C? It's just that one of them is doing it the way God intended them to learn, and the other one switched and decided to do it the way the school system was teaching and society. They decided to memorize. If you can take that average C student and teach them how to do it right, they can do it. Give you one more example of something that happened when I was teaching. This is the only student I had who really got a hold of this, and actually was the student. I never gave lectures. I used to give lectures like this to my classes on the first couple days. I'd never done that until one gal, she was 65 years old. Her name was Sherry. She came into my class. It's an introduction to computer class. It was the only one she was required to take. She was in the secretarial program. So the first test, she got a 60 on it. How many of you know that 60 on this test and 60 on the next test and 60 is not going to get you through the course? So she came in and she was all upset and she needed the class. She wasn't going to be able to graduate her program without this class. She says, I can't do this class. She just didn't know what to do. Because it wasn't going to do her any good to drop my class, she'd have to just drop out of school because she couldn't meet her goal of getting her certificate without my class. The information gets more difficult as you go, and she's at a 60 going in the gate. She knows it's going to be downhill from here on in, right? So I talked to her, and I said, Sherry, let me give you a hint. try this next week. And I talked to her about incorporating and all this. I said, you take everything I say and you figure out what you came through the door with. And if you have to, just jot down a couple words, go home and think about it. But you make a connection between everything I say in class to something you already know. That's all you need to do. You just do that with everything I say this next week. And then let's see what happens. She did. Anybody care to guess what her grade on the next test was? 95. She got 95 on the next test. Not only that, she never got below a 95 on any other test. Now, here's what's interesting. This lady told me when she came to me originally that school had never been a good thing for her. She says, I have never in my life, in 12 years of schooling, I never got over an 80 on any test I've ever taken. And yet 95 plus all the way through the rest of my class. All 95 pluses except for the first 60. She did fine. Okay, she got an A in the course because she started incorporating. The difference between the child who's going through the breeze and the kid who's not, many times is just the way they're trying to memorize instead of actually incorporating and learning. And it's not that easy. You can actually try this. Give this a try today in service when Pastor Mark's going through his message. And maybe we'll take a few minutes next week and you can report on what happened. You're going to find you're going to have to pay closer attention than you normally do. How many of you take notes in the service? If you do, don't write down anything he says. First rule, take everything he says, relate it to something you already know right now, and write that in your notes. I can almost guarantee you're going to tell me, I got more out of that message than I've ever gotten out of a message before. So today, homework for next week is to take good notes, correct notes, association notes for the message today. Now, do y'all see why I told you on my first degree, way back when I told you when I got my first degree, I struggled. I was doing 2 hours outside of class of study for every hour inside of class, got a 2-point something. Second one, 10 hours of study for 3 years. All my classes combined, less than 10 hours of study outside of class. 3 point, I don't know what it was, 6 or something. 3.8. Whew, pretty good. No study outside of class. Now, do you see how I did it? I was just simply taking good notes. I was associating. I never wrote down anything I didn't understand. And how did I know I understood it? Because I could relate it to something I came in the door with, and that's what I wrote in my notes. And so, was I studying? Oh, yeah. How much was I studying? The required amount. In fact, I was doing it to the minute. If the class was 51 and a half minutes long, I did 51 and a half minutes of study. Only I did it simultaneous with my class time. When I walked out of the class, I knew the material. Did I have to study it afterwards? No, because I knew it.
How would you do it if you're taking a class online and you have to study yourself, you don't have a teacher?
Same way. It's like if you're reading a book or anything. It doesn't make any difference. In other words, the information coming into your brain doesn't have to be coming via the ears. It can be coming via the eyes or whatever. If you're reading a textbook or reading something online, you should be looking at that information and saying, okay, what do I already know that's like that? You should be making an association, make a connection between any new material regardless of the source. Make a connection between the new material and the old material. Of course, one of my favorite questions from my students was, well, what if I can't think of anything? Well, I guess you won't learn that. I hate to be just blunt, but, well, you're not going to get it. You can memorize it, but 3 weeks from now it'll be gone. You're wasting your time. You've got to make the connection. Okay? You have to. It is a requirement. You've got to do it. And if you're working with your kids, you can ask them questions like that. She's always asking them questions like, well, why? Why? Where does a why question take you? Child makes a statement, you say, why? Where does that take them? Does that take them into here? Into the memorization little schema, or does that take them into the main part of their schema? Where does that question, where do they got to go to get the answer to that? Yeah, by asking questions, you can force your child to make those connections. Her favorite word. What's this? Blah, blah, blah. Why? Or defend that. You made a statement. Defend it. Oh, kids hate it when you do that, don't they? Oh, they get mad. Once they do that, they'll know the material. They're here, you force them into here, that is like the lasso that reaches out and pulls that in. Once you've got the learning, now we come to, in our typical situation, we all have tests. How do you take a test? I could do a whole class on just how to take tests. I know because I actually took a class in college. The whole semester was about how to take tests. I learned a lot in that class. I'm going to show you some things today, just basic things that you can do right away. How to take tests. Number one, before you go in to take a test, make sure you get a good night's sleep and eat a breakfast. You say, oh, I don't eat breakfast. My wife doesn't eat breakfast, but I'd say eat breakfast. You don't want a starved brain sitting there in a test, and you want to be well rested. Some things you don't want to do is you don't want to create something called test anxiety. Do you know what the best way, if you want to create test anxiety, which will just nail your hide to the wall on the day of the test, what's probably the best way to create test anxiety? Well, it's just cram the night before. That'll do it every time. Okay? So what do we all do the night before the test? Yeah, we do the one thing you don't want to do. Number one, primary, don't do, no. That's what we all do. Don't do that again. I've always told my students, here's the rule. Never study for a test within the 24-hour period of time prior to the test. If you don't know it by then, forget it. The only thing you can do at this point is memorize it for the test. But in the process, you're going to create test anxiety, and that thing you went over 500 times and you got it like you got your own name. You're going to come to that question on the test and you're going to look at it and you're going to go, oh, what was that? I know that. Test anxiety. It's gone. And you know when you're going to remember it? As you walk out the door.
After the test.
There's a field right here, and as you go through, it's like those detection things in the supermarkets, and as you go through, it hits that switch in your brain, and it's like, oh yeah! You go back in and teach it, no, you can't have it back. You already turned it in, too late. Test anxiety. It's a brick wall that just goes up between what you know and your hand, and it just blocks everything. You don't want to do that. It inhibits recall. It's there. You can't recall it. So no study 24 hours before the test. No alcohol or drugs or anything like that during that period of time. Like I used to tell my students all the time, you cannot take a test when you're anesthetized or asleep. Just not going to do well. Another story, true story. I actually did this. When I was working on my degree in education, in order to get that degree, at that time, it's different now, but we used to have something called a CAT. It's a California Achievement Test, and every single elementary school teacher in the state of Colorado had to take that test and pass it before they could get their degree. If you didn't get a degree, you didn't teach. So guess when you took this test? You got a 4-year education, right? Guess when you took this test? During your junior year. So 1, 2, 3, 4, you're taking it here. You've already got 2.5 years of lots of work, lots of education and everything, and if you fail this test, all this work is worthless because you will never teach in the state of Colorado. That was the rule then. I don't know what it is now, but that was the rule then. Now, you tell me, do you think if you were a potential teacher getting ready to go and take that test, would you be totally relaxed or would you be highly stressed? You get 3 attempts. You fail it third time, that's it. You don't get any more chances. It's over. Oh, you talk about stressed out because of this guy. So I'm sitting here going, okay, test anxiety, this is not good. I cannot have any test anxiety when I go in here. I know this material already. You know why I knew? You know what the California Achievement Test is? It's the test they gave in California to all 6th graders to make sure they had learned in 6th grade what they needed to learn. Do you think there was anything on that test I didn't know? Give me a break. Every one of you in this class probably could pass that test right now. It's a 6th grade test. How many of you got further than 6th grade in school? You could pass the test. There's nothing on there, so why are we all stressing out? Well, it's because of this. Our career is on the line. So everybody's cramming. They're getting together in study groups and doing the sample tests, and it's just all this. I can't do that. All they're doing is raising test anxiety. They're going to go in there total experts on this test and fail it because they're not going to be able to recall. I heard this. How are you preparing for the test? Well, I'm just cramming everything, but what I'm going to do that morning when I get up, I'm going to down about 3 beers, so I'm really relaxed. Oh, man. They're not going to make it. That is not the way you take a test. You can't take a test like that drunk. Y'all understand that? We're talking about potential teachers of our children who don't understand that, okay? Oh, so I'm going, well, how am I going to get past this? I said, I got to come up with a strategy. One day, when sitting in the throne room at the school, how many of you do your best thinking in there besides me? It came to me. I said, I got it figured out. I got 3 shots. I got 3 shots at this test. So here's the deal. I'm going to go in there, and on the first try, on try number 1, my goal is to fail the test. I'm going to go in, and my goal is to fail the test. Now, how can I mess that one up? Do you think I'm going to have any test anxiety? I don't need to get anxious about that. I can pull that off without working too hard. It's a dry run. I may pass it, I may fail, I don't care. I'm going in, this is a recon mission. That's all I'm doing, is I'm reconning the test. I want to know what's on the test. And that way, I'll know what's on the test, and then when I get my scores back, the areas I did really well in, I won't have to worry about, and the only ones I got to work on are the ones I did poorly in, so that when I go in for try number 2, I can pass it, and I don't have to worry about test number 3. Perfect strategy, right? So what am I doing while all my classmates are spending untold hours cramming for this test? What am I doing? I'm just going on with life. The only thing I'm worried about is the date of the test. I don't want to miss the date and not be there, so I'm worried about making it there on time on the right day. That's all I'm concerned about. There's 3 sections of the test. I'm one of the first ones done with the first section. I went back to my seat and actually kind of went to sleep. I'm that relaxed. Second section, I was one of the first ones done, went back and kind of nodded out a little bit. Third section, I was done way early, handed in and left. I had 3 scores. I had 3 scores come back on that test for the 3 sections. Not one of them was under 95. I not only passed it, I almost aced that sucker the first time around. Why? 0 test anxiety. On a test that was 6th grade level, I knew the stuff. I didn't have to study for it, didn't have to prepare for it. It was testing me on stuff that I had coming out of 6th grade years and years and years before. All I needed to do is what? Eliminate test anxiety. Do you know what most of my classmates did? Worked that test anxiety up to a maximum. Were there any of them, do you think, that failed that test first time around? Bunches. And they failed it the second time around. And there were a few that failed it the third time around. Not because they didn't know the material, but because they were stressed out. And they were stressed out because they did an excellent job of preparing for anxiety. Okay? Now, when you take a test, I'm going to just address these multiple guess tests, standardized tests. One of the things I do is I will sit there before I actually take the test, I'll read it. And you don't want to read it word for word, you just kind of skim it. I don't look at the answers, I just look at the questions. I read every question. I start with number 1, go through number 100, whatever it is, I read every question. Now I know what the test is about. Then you take the test, take your time, don't rush. Because what does rushing do? It gets that test anxiety going, stay relaxed. First thing I do, I make multiple passes through the test. I go through the first time, I've already read the test, so I kind of know what's coming. I answer the questions that I just know exactly what the answer is. So if there's a question on that test that says, what's 2 plus 2? Guess what? That's going to be one I'm going to answer the first time around. I know that. I got it. I would die for that answer. That's how well I know it. I do those first. Then I go back through, and of course by now I really know where these questions are at, right? I go back through, and now I'm answering the ones that I pretty much know, but I'm not really sure. I got to put a little bit of thought in it. Maybe they're the questions where I looked at it, and obviously 2 of the 4 answers were obviously wrong, but now I got to think a little bit about those other 2 and kind of, So I do those next. Then I go back to third pass, and I'm doing the ones that I really got to think about, or maybe ones I got to do some calculations on, or maybe I need to draw a picture to help me with it. You know, these are going to take a little more work. And then I go back through and get the ones that are just really toughies. And when I finally get all the way in, when you get down to those last 5 or 6, guess what you do? You roll the pencil. How many of you know what I mean when I say roll the pencil? You take the size of your pencil, and one of them is A, one of them is B, one of them is C, and you roll it. And whichever one is up, that's the answer you put for that question. Or you can go with the fact that Most questions are going to be a C or a B, so you go CB, 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 CB on those last 5 and you hand it in because you have no clue. You don't even understand the question. It's like, where'd they get this from? I'm taking a test here on English. This is nuclear physics, so I can't do this. Just pick an answer, roll the pencil, whatever. But those are the last ones you do. Those are the last ones. So you work from the easy to the difficult. Make multiple passes through the test. Don't leave an answer unanswered on most tests. Now, they'll tell you if you're penalized more heavily for a wrong answer, and they have some tests where you get 1 point for getting it right and 2 off for getting it wrong. It's better to leave them blank. There's not very many tests that way. So generally, you make sure you answer everything. So even if you just go through and put C, 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 C on the last 5, that's better because at least statistically one of those is going to be right. If you got time, go back and check your answers. Make sure you haven't missed any. About every 5 questions, any question number that ends in a 0 and a 5, my practice is if I'm on question number 25, I want to look at that 25 and make sure that I'm on number 25 on my bubble sheet. Because if you skipped one along the way, you can have every question from there on wrong. So every 5 answers I check to make sure that I'm in sync. You have no idea how many students I've seen totally mess up a test because they skipped number 3 and they put the answer for 4 in slot 3 and they did that all the way through the end of the test and just didn't get it. So make sure you don't do that. Let me give you an example of just some things you want to watch for. There's a ton of these things. You can give me a 10-question test about your life and I can probably pass it. I'm going to just show you one strategy that's very good. This doesn't work too well on our modern standardized tests, but if your child knew this on a test you were making up for them, they could use this because chances are you'd make this little error, and if you know you're aware of it, you can do it. Let me write the test up here. It says, I ate a, and then here are your possible. The first one is apple. The second one is banana. That's the test question. What's the answer? If you think you know. Now, there is only one answer. 3 of them are absolutely wrong. How many of you think it might be A? How many B? How many C? How many D? Oh, we got some wrong answers in the class. You said it's B. Why is it B? Why is that the answer?
You ate A.
There's the key. You always put A with a consonant. If it's a vowel, it's an apple, an orange, an apricot. An goes with the next word as a vowel, but A always goes with the first letter of a consonant in the next word. That's why B is the right answer to that question. Do you know how many tests are done up where that English mistakes are in it? Do you think the teacher makes a mistake with the right answer? No. They're going to make mistakes on the wrong answers. If you know your English really well, guess what? That's one of the strategies you can use. If you run down through the test and you got 2 answers that just don't make sense English-wise with the question, well, those are out. Now you're left with the other 2. Now, why is that important? Because if you're guessing between 4 questions, you got 1 chance in 4 of getting it right. But if you can say eliminate this one and this one on the basis of English, now you got a 50-50 chance of getting that thing right if you have to guess. The odds are better. And if based on English, you can eliminate 3, I actually did this once in one of my classes. I had a student make up a test about their life, which of course I knew nothing about. I took the test, I passed it. You know why? I picked my students because my tests at that time were essay, so I knew who had the worst English, and that's the person I picked. And so based on English, the way they phrased it, I answered 10 questions and got like 9 of them correct. Questions about their life that I knew nothing about, I got a 90% on the test using nothing more than just English. So there's tons of strategies. The course I took on how to take tests, they spent a whole semester going over strategy after strategy after strategy after strategy. I'm telling you that because there's books out there that you can get on this. If you have a child who knows material but has trouble taking tests, you can go get a book on how to take tests, and they'll go over all these different strategies. Because you know what? When you go in to take a test, you got an ACT test or an SAT, and your goal is to get into college, guess what? It's not whether you know the material, it's whether you can pass the test. You understand? And so every test-taking strategy like that you can use, the better. On math questions, drawing pictures and things like that are really neat. One of the strategies that a lot of people miss with math is when they try and take a math test, they try and actually work the problem. Let me give you a math. Here's the 4 answers, and I'm going to end with this. 30 minutes, 1 hour. Again, I'm just showing you a strategy here, okay? It may help you on a test, but you can show your kids these things too. We got a yard here. It's 50 feet this way and 50 feet that way. It's a 50-foot square. It takes a person 1 hour to mow that. So the question is, on the test, that these are your possible answers. If it takes him 1 hour to mow this yard 50 feet by 50 feet, how long does it take him to mow a yard that's 100 feet by 100 feet? Does anybody see some answers up there that we can just, not even doing the math, we can just say, well, that can't be the case, just using pure logic. We can eliminate A, right? Why can we eliminate A? Yeah, this is a bigger yard. It's going to take more time. We know it's got to be more than what? An hour. Is there another one based on that logic we can get rid of? This guy's out. It's got to be one of the others. We're down to that. So how many of you think it's C? How many of you think it's D? Well, watch. Here's where a picture comes in handy. Here's 50 by 50. If the yard is 100 by 100, it's going to be what? Twice as long this way, right? And it's going to be what? Twice as long that way. Draw your little picture. Okay, now how many of you think it's C? Oh, no hands that time. Wow. How many of you think it's D? Amazing what a little picture will do, isn't it? Math is visual. It's visual. Einstein was really good at this. He was not good at working the numbers. He was really good at visualizing. You got to visualize it. And if you do that, math is this easy? Now, without the picture, was it so easy? You weren't sure, were you? I saw hands going like, I don't know. After I drew the picture, then when I got here, everybody was like, oh, yeah. Very positive, very sure. Before, you got the wrong answer and you really weren't sure about it. And the difference was you weren't visualizing. Visualization is the key to mathematics. And if you can visualize, you got it made. Okay, that's it.